What Toronto Climate Week really aims to do is to take Toronto, transform the city, if you will, into a global stage. So we're not thinking of it as Toronto's Climate Week. Yes, this is the place where it's actually happening, but it is a stage for climate solutions connecting Canada's sustainability efforts with the world so that when the world looks outside in, they can see just how much is happening here.
Hey, I'm Justin Rice, the founder of Climate Tech Canada. Today we're talking with Becky Park-Romanovsky, the founder and executive director of Toronto Climate Week. But as Becky explains, it's also about creating a platform to surface Canada's climate leadership to the world. They kicked off last fall with what was planned as a single day with 20 events. Instead, it drew more than 100 events and 5,000 attendees from 30 countries. Now their first full week is coming up, June 1st to 7th, and I wanted to sit down with Becky to learn more about what they have planned and their long-term vision for Toronto Climate Week. Becky and I talk about Toronto's potential as a climate hub, where it's strong and who still needs to come to the table. We talk about how corporate climate action isn't really slowing down even as public commitments disappear, and what Canada's climate ecosystem looks like in 5 years if Toronto Climate Week is successful. Becky also has an interesting vantage point, seeing across 16 tracks covering everything from natural resources to water to youth, and to get her take on what that can tell us about where investment and support is actually flowing. Becky and I have known each other for a while through hosting our own respective climate events, and it was a lot of fun to go behind the scenes with her. And now, my conversation with Becky. Becky, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Justin. So nice to be here. Really appreciate your time and the opportunity.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you coming on. Lots to talk about today, but I would love to start with a bit of background on yourself. This is not your first foray into events by any means. You co-founded Climate North, which was community climate events in Toronto. You built a sustainable events startup, which I actually didn't know before doing some research for this conversation. So yeah, maybe just tell us a little bit about your path to working in climate and why you keep coming back to these events.
I asked myself the same question, so let's figure that out together. This is an interesting story, especially because you and I actually met at one of our events.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time kind of learning about different climate topics together. So it's exciting to take that and end up on this podcast with you. Your question, I actually come from HR. So I did a bachelor's in human resources and then ended up working at one of the big banks. And I spent now probably half of my career doing that. Slowly, I've started shifting my own lifestyle when I learned more about climate and the crisis that's around us and what we need to do to try to make it better. Working in the big bank, I saw what looked like just a lot of waste, a lot of plastic all around, and that really kind of was striking to me at one of the big events that we had, like an annual convening, where everything was plastic plates and the cutlery and the decorations. And then at the end of the day, they just put it all in the garbage. And that's where my first startup idea came up. So what I would do is just find ways to source these more sustainable supplies for big convenings. And I sold it internally at the bank and then went and it became quite successful very quickly. I wasn't expecting it. I didn't see myself as an entrepreneur, although I always really admired other entrepreneurs. And I was almost ready to quit my job and go that way. And just to frame that, that was around 2019. So when 2020 hit,
yeah,
there was no more parties and no more supplies needed. So I decided to quit my job, move to Europe to do a master's because as much as I was passionate about it, I didn't know much about it at all. I decided I needed more of kind of whole picture education to know what's out there, what I might be interested in. When I came back to Toronto in 2022 is when I found a job in climate that I loved and really enjoyed. I was a carbon project developer, but it was international. So I came back to Toronto to my old friends and old colleagues, but I didn't have anyone in this field. I decided to start Climate North with two co-founders, whom you know as well. And it was just to make friends and to learn more and see kind of what's out there, what exists in Toronto. I didn't really know anyone here. And it grew exponentially quite quickly. Our first event was like 8 people. And then before you know it, we were just selling out of rooms of 100 people. That really taught me that I really get inspired and motivated by seeing sort of two people get together and then start some kind of project or start a friendship, anything along those lines. That just gives me that spark to keep going and keep pushing.
Yeah, that's something you and I think, have in common is like creating those spaces where people can meet each other. And it sounds like too, kind of like find your people. You know, you went off and did this journey of learning about climate, working in climate, and then how do I have people in my circle around this? So lots to talk about. I think we should probably just start with like a bit of a level set. Can you tell us what Toronto Climate Week is and why do we need it?
So let me start with the easy one.
Yeah.
What is Toronto Climate Week? So the idea here is that, similar to what you said, actually, we're bringing all actors to the table, especially those who don't usually get to cross paths in their climate or environment or sustainability work. Now, the way that we do that is sort of twofold. One side is my team, the Toronto Climate Week team, organizes events such as the kickoff that you mentioned, where we intentionally curate content and an invite list where we bring everybody together. The second sort of side of the coin is that we are also a platform helping other organizations put on their own events, which really creates a very flavorful week of events because you can have everything from big corporations doing their own convenings. It could be as big as, full day conferences or as small as roundtable events all the way down to grassroots organizations who are doing like a beach cleanup. So really a wide range of type of events, type of hosts, industries, sectors, everything. And as an attendee or as somebody who's not hosting an event, you have the opportunity to attend all. Now,
So it's almost like an interface layer to the rest of the world. Toronto's not the only place where stuff is happening, but here's where you can come to kind of get plugged into everything. Does that kind of
exactly.
capture it?
That's perfect. Yes, exactly.
Something that has also really struck me is there's such a big tent at Toronto Climate Week. There's room for the arts and culture, there's room for science, there's room for nature and conservation. Could you maybe just unpack that decision, like to have such a wide net? But it seemed like you were almost, there was maybe like an intentional push to like keep it really broad and bring in some of those sectors that maybe didn't see themselves here.
Yes, it was very intentional. And we'll put a lot of really hard work into that. So I guess there's a couple things to say here. First is why we did this. And then I guess the second question is really how it happened. So the how, I'll start there because I already started. It was intentional. And we really invited all types of groups across industries. Like you said, there'll be the conservation, there'll be banking, right? Like everything
Yeah,
that
yeah.
we could possibly think of. And we brought them, we reached out, we made it as easy for them as possible to participate, whether it's hosting an event or attending. And we put a lot of work into answering a ton of questions in the
Right.
very beginning. The reason is climate itself and sustainability, not just climate environment, is multifaceted. You really have to work at it from all angles. So we really see ourselves as the convening body because we want the solutions to come from everywhere. And without all actors at the table, we're not going to achieve anything. So that's really our first and biggest goal is to bring everybody to the table. The second, there are a lot of people who I think don't necessarily see themselves as part of the effort, but would be if it was approachable and accessible to them, which is why, and you mentioned this, we had so much art and culture and music and sports this year that we're incorporating into it because that's sort of like a gateway into
Hmm.
this kind of work. So you might see an event that really just looks fun and it's a party, and then you go in and you meet great people and they're all just a bit more, sustainability inclined than your usual group of friends, and you sort of get into it. That's our intention here, and also making it less threatening. You don't have to come in the room knowing everything about conservation or clean tech. You just want to come in the room to hear from, your favorite hockey player, and then you learn about all the great work that this player might be doing, and it might bring you into it as well. So really the conversion here is what we're looking for as well.
It makes a lot of sense in terms of bringing more people into the fold and having that kind of open door. You officially kicked off really last fall, surpassing your target of, I think your target was like 1,500 people. blew that away. What were some of your big takeaways from that kickoff? And particularly like in terms of the community and the appetite that you saw?
Yeah, well, my very initial target was one day. I thought we would have around 20 events. One of them was ours, and around 1,000. And that grew very, very quickly. At some point, we ended up, yeah, I was saying, okay, 1,500 attendees. Then we had to expand to 3 days because so many events were coming in. So we did end up with 3 days. It was 100 events and over 5,000 attendees. The reason that we started small is because coming from Climate North, I knew that there was some appetite out there for events, but for something this to work out, it really needs a demand and a supply to be in place. And I couldn't tell you how much of it was there. I just wanted to act now, and if it was going to be done, it was going to be done now. So the idea, I started working on it at the end of March, and we launched October 1st, so 4 months.
Wow.
May 27th is when we announced it, actually. So the 4 months was actually like work after the announcement. Before that, it was just the idea in my head, and I was talking to people, telling them I have a crazy idea. Some of them joined.
Yeah.
What we really learned is, first of all, the hypothesis of the demand and supply kind of played itself out really well. There was a lot of demand for these kind of events and convenience, but there was also enough supply of organizations or communities or corporations who actually wanted to host those events and take on, which is a lot of responsibility and work. And we are anticipating about double of that. So we just gave everybody 4 months heads up. Hey, by the way, this is happening. Now
Yeah.
that people have known for a long time that it's coming, there's been a lot of preparation behind the scenes. So we confirmed that. Another thing that was really interesting and I guess surprising in a very nice way is that multiple seniority levels and these kind of different sectors and industries were also involved. What I mean by that is at Climate North, so the events that we usually had, it was not curated by any means in terms of invite list. Everybody's welcome. And we saw mostly students, people interested, people entering, and a few seasoned folks like yourself. But here it was a really good combination of that plus organizations and individuals who've been working in it for a long time, and some of them very senior. So C-level presidents, et cetera, at our events who really wanted to come out. I still had a feeling that for a long time it'll be mostly the community, and then slowly we'll drag in the decision makers. But no, they were there from day one, which was very, very impressive.
That's a really fascinating insight that that appetite was there. They were ready to show up. It was almost like everyone was working and waiting for a platform to be there. And like obviously, there's good stuff happening in Toronto and other cities and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, it's really cool to see people show up and say, yeah, we're going to support this thing day one.
Yeah. And it's one thing to say we'll show up. And another thing, I've talked to a lot of people, and a lot of people said, like, yes, oh my God, we need a Toronto Client Week for sure. But then when it actually happened, until you actually like sell the thing that
Yeah.
ended about, doesn't mean anything. So once we started actually like selling the tickets and people actually wanted to shop, and then we sold out of our event, and then my mailbox were floating because so many people wanted to come in, that's when I realized that this actually has a lot of life.
And then so the first full week is coming up in June. What are some of the big themes that you're focused on for this event?
It's actually one of the learnings that I have been, I guess, gathering up from last year. What are those themes that are most interesting? But also, like, to be very transparent, where is the money? Like, where is their funding? Because that really dictates the level of participation of different organizations. What we have determined this year is we've laid out 16 different tracks, what we call, and within those tracks, we anticipate the around 200 events will fall thematically. We prioritized, I think, 6 or 7 of those. We're focused on one of them. This is a very general one, covers a lot, but we call it natural resources, infrastructure, and energy. It is absolutely smashing all of our expectations. It's oversubscribed. We have a flagship event on the topic. It was the first one to sell out of sponsorship, quite popular. And then we have another one, which is youth. We felt that there wasn't enough of it last year, not enough support for youth participation, not enough events. And we actually partnered up with Leading Change. and they're hosting a really big full day event for youth specifically. Another theme is food and agriculture. That one is my favorite. I'm pushing it. But also, I don't know if it's because I've put extra time into it or because there is actually a lot of engagement. We have a really great event coming together under that track as well. And a lot of really interesting speakers and organizations who are coming through. Another one, pretty obvious one, we call it carbon solutions, but it's really like greenhouse gas management. So a lot of policy participation there. Carbon Removal Canada is working on it with us, but also encouraging other organizations to come in and put their own events as well. Sustainable finance, we always need the money.
Yeah.
We don't always need investment. So that's a big one. And there's quite a bit of it last year. So we're just continuing that trend.
And in
Clean
Toronto
tech,
with the big banks and all of that, it's the place
yeah,
to do it.
the place to do it. We have quite a few good VCs who are working on
Yeah.
that as well. And on that theme, clean tech and innovation as well is another big theme. We have, of course, here Mars and UFT. They're both leading a really big event on the topic. And then the last one that I should mention is nature and water that we were trying to push for a long time. That is a bit similar to youth, where we're not doing this because we want it. I genuinely thought it would be a very big draw. I mean, environment, nature, it seems to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
We did sell out of sponsorship completely, but it just took a bit more work because a lot of the companies or I guess organizations that work in it are actually nonprofit. There's just a longer decision making process for them to actually get engaged in something new. But once they're in, they're super locked in and it's going really well. So there's a lot of traction on that one too.
Okay, so it sounds like a bit of opinionated. We think there's a bit more platform for like youth and things like that. And then also this piece of like, this is what the community is asking for and folks want to create content around. If you were talking to folks, and I think particularly folks, like I talk to people across the country, if you're talking to someone, what's the case for people to come to Toronto Climate Week? And maybe we could talk about like people in like the clean tech space specifically. What would you say to them as like the reason to come out?
It depends on the person. I'll switch my pitch
Totally,
depending on
yeah.
who I'm talking to. But really, what a climate week creates, and I wouldn't just claim it for Toronto, but just in general, in mind started something like this, is because it brings all the players from across, like cross sector, into one room and allows you to have the kind of progress in a few days that would take you weeks or months anywhere else because everybody's already in the city, everybody wants to grab a coffee, especially people outside who don't know a lot of people here. Everybody's available, everybody took the time off just to dedicate to creating new relationships, to learning about new projects, to potentially investors come in to find startups go out to find collaborators. Like everyone is here ready to make things happen. That's sort of the spirit of a climate week and the one of the reasons we started it. Another thing that's really interesting is that I don't really have to convince, like, I haven't had the
Yeah, yeah.
chance or the opportunity. Like last year, unintentionally, we had 300 people outside of the greater Toronto area. So even
Okay.
outside of Toronto, we have the suburbs. We don't even count that. Outside of that, those 300 people and 30 different countries represented. So we had no time to put any kind of work into encouraging people to come in from the outside. But what ended up happening is that they did. Seeing that this year we actually deployed a team who is working on international partnerships, marketing, etc. But yeah, so far it's just been more like, do you have any deals with hotels that you can send us?
Right, right. Yeah.
As opposed to trying to get people in, which has been inspiring.
I think those numbers are really good to hear about the diverse range of people that are in the room from across the globe, from across Canada. Like, I think those, what you were saying about everyone is here ready to make connections, like, that makes a lot of sense. And so you're in like a really unique position. So you're helping kind of set some of these flagship tracks. You're seeing kind of across the whole thing. I'm really curious, are there any signals that or patterns that have jumped out to you that you're seeing across all that other folks maybe haven't picked up on?
Yeah, I think those the specific tracks that I've mentioned, some of them were surprising to me as like which ones were the most popular as opposed to less. That was a big signal. Like to me, that means that's where the investment is going into.
For sure.
Another thing that I've observed quite a bit through conversations across all kinds of organizations is that climate work, sustainability is still going on in the background and is very strong. There's a lot more hesitancy to talk about it. But I was quite surprised to see that in Canada. I know we have a lot of customers and, partnerships with US companies, but there's been a lot of relabeling of terms, right? It's not energy, it's energy
Sure, yeah.
security, like all those fun things, but also really big companies that are doing a lot of great work. They have made their, let's say, commitments. They have removed those commitments from their website, but they're still working towards them. They're still setting up goals and looking to meet them. And the same companies tell me, oh, our CSO is actually not allowed to speak publicly, not just about
Oh,
efforts
interesting.
at all.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's this clear sign of green hushing, which there's different ways to look at it. There's some hope. So you might not be seeing it, but there's work going on. So kind of stay assured that it's happening. And on the other hand, it's like, well, why are we not talking about it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the green hushing sounds like it is definitely a real thing. I think too with kind of the greenwashing legislation in Canada with the states, like it's a bit of a I can see it being a hard line to walk sometimes for
Yeah.
companies and for those like CSO officers. But on the flip side, who do you want to see more of? Like, is there a
Mm.
gap in the types of attendees or organizations that you would love to see more involvement in?
Last year it was really hard to get more of the corporations and the nonprofits involved, just very long cycles of decision making. This year they're in. So anybody
Cool.
who last year we got a no from, we said, okay, no problem. June is coming up. Let's do this for June. And so that gave them more time. We're going to publish all of our sponsors and partners quite soon. And I'm so proud of all the different organizations that came in. I'm so happy about that. So I would say we have achieved that, and I understand why it took some time. I would love to expand our relationship with the provincial government. So we had a lot of support from the municipal government. They've been amazing. The federal government recently went through a lot of changes, but they're still very dedicated. They're doing everything that they can to support us. And there's different departments as well. We're working with NRCan on one event actually together. ECCC is really kind of there for us. Haven't had as much breakthrough with the provincial government yet, but we're working on it. We'll get there. And then, as always, really underrepresented groups, BIPOC community. Just the more that we can get out, giving them opportunities to speak, making it easier for them to host events. That's really what I would love to see more, and who's, in my opinion, needs more support. So we're more working as hard as we can to make it as easy for them to participate. So we found low cost accommodations, for example. So we have a partnership with different universities to leverage their residences during summer, they need them, to offer that if they need it. We have a partnership with Sacred Earth, who's an Indigenous led organization, and they're helping us make sure that all of our events have Indigenous representation and bringing in and creating those connections. We have the youth event that we're talking about. We made sure that all of our tickets are no more than $30 so that it's accessible to
Okay.
all. Some events are free, some are up to $30. And we always have complimentary tickets available, especially for Indigenous and anyone really who reaches out. And yeah, we made sure that there's no all male panels. So every panel
Okay.
needs to have at least one woman. So just making sure that, to be as equitable as possible and prop up and help the groups that need a little bit more help than others.
It's interesting, being positioned as this decentralized platform. It also gives you the ability to help event organizers like make some of these better decisions about like, hey, did you realize you have a blind spot here? Like this could be done a little bit differently, or thinking about how accessible is your event. I think anyone doing an event for like the first time or who hasn't like thought about this stuff before, they're easy mistakes to make. And so it's like kind of nice to have that nudge in a lot of cases. I'd love to hear your take on Toronto as this hub. Like hubs are kind of hard to force, it's more a reflection, as you said, of like the talent, the capital, et cetera. At a pretty high level view, like what does that look like in Toronto right now? Like where do you see some of the strengths or advantages, and maybe like what's still emerging or more you'd like to see built out more?
we have a great potential as a hub to be all inclusive because Canadians, I've lived in several countries around the world. So from my, modest experience of those specific countries, it could be, a little subjective here. But from what I've seen, Canadians have a very unique inclination towards nature. A lot more greenery, a lot more water around us, and sort of this inherited respect towards the environment, which really sparks this culture where when I talk to people in other countries about protecting the environment, there's kind of this disconnect of like the environment is over there and I'm over here and I don't really see the connection. I've never felt that when I spoke to a Canadian. There's always this
Yeah.
inherent understanding of like, yeah, of course, it's got to be protected. Maybe not something I have to do, but
Right.
that's a notion that's like accepted. So I do think that that culture is preserved, even though we're a big city and pretty unique for Canada as a whole. And we have the financial hub, a lot of investment happening here, a lot of clean tech, a lot of entrepreneurs that come here in order to make those things happen. And opportunities is really making sure that we're not necessarily just focused on the themes that, you know, really popular right now, like energy or EVs, like, there's always like the cool ones. And then there's others that need a bit more propping up, like adaptation or, like I was saying before, oceans or circular economy, right? Those kind
Right.
of
Right.
themes that need a bit more love. I think I would love to see more in Toronto. As a climate hub, what that actually means is that outsiders look into Toronto. That's in my case, in our case, I would like to represent Canada as a whole and think about, okay, I want to create something new. I want to invent. I want to invest. Where do I go first? It might be right now, in New York. I want in the very near future it to be Toronto. Oh, I should move to Toronto because there's lots of opportunity there, specifically in sustainability and climate. So that's what we're working towards and what we're looking to establish.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think too, like, this is part of building that international reputation and having Toronto and by extension Canada be a place that people think of to invest in and build. And we're seeing more and more of that. Like, I think more people are waking up to the great founders that we have in Canada, a lot of our natural strengths, and I think now like relative strength to some other places in the world. So I think it's a really important time for this to be happening. And I think too, like, it's great to hear the kind of call it Toronto Climate Week is really just an interface for what's happening across Canada. This isn't like what's happening just within the borders. So to thinking about that hub and international outlook, you've set some targets for June. I would imagine one of the hard things about running an event is the outcomes are not necessarily in your control, right? It's like who meets each other, what happens the day of. How do you think about like measuring success and like what's the qualitative outcome that would feel like, yeah, we really did it this year?
So we're actually working on exactly that. We're calling it complex data. There's some data that's really easy to find, like how many people showed up and how many events were there, right? But that is really tough and is
Yeah.
exactly what's going to inform how successful we are. How many pilots have started, connections have been made, partnerships have, flourished from Toronto Climate Week. What connections were made, and then what did they lead to in terms of productive, actionable outcomes? And so we have a task force, and we're just finishing a partnership with a very reputable company who might help us with that specific. Why it's complex is because it takes a long time for these partnerships or outcomes to come together. So, you and I might have met at a Climate North event, but if we didn't have
Yeah.
great memories, we might not even remember that. And then 2 years later, we have a podcast. So this podcast is an outcome of us meeting
Yeah.
2 years ago. Yeah, so that's very difficult. We are setting up the KPIs right now of what that's going to look like. We're going to establish kind of a starting point, then developing over the years. In terms of success of this year, I would love to see a lot more international participation, which we're actively working on. I would love to see more of the underrepresented groups feeling inspired and empowered to have those events and seeing how much of that my team was able to encourage and enable. And then transparently, we're also need to be self-sustainable. So I mentioned in the beginning that I was a carbon project developer. It was lots of fun, great money. I had to quit that to do Toronto Climate Week. I thought I could do Toronto Climate Week in my free time. Now I'm doing Toronto Climate Week full time, and I have no free time because I'm still doing Toronto Climate Week. So there's me, and then I have my head of operations there as well. We're working full time on this. So another success, I guess, lever for me would be figuring out how to continue to be able to work on this and serve the community while also sustaining ourselves as people who need to eat and roof over our head. So
Yeah.
really establishing that sustainable business model for Climate Week and what that looks like, ideally a blended sort of finance approach. So we get sponsorship right now, we got some donations, can we get grants from the government, and can we establish our own business models that will sustain us? That was about measuring, but then how do we also make sure that there is more of that action happening? So there's a lot of talking and presenting and speaking during Toronto Climate Week, but then how do we actually drive outcomes and results? So can we as Toronto Climate Week continue to do something in between those great
Right.
talking and networking opportunities and make things happen? If we can figure that out this year, that would also be a huge success for us.
Fantastic. No, that makes a lot of sense. So we're towards the end of our time here. I want to just get your thoughts. Like, if you were to think about 5 years from now, if Toronto Climate Week has done its job, what's different? Like, what looks different in Canada?
We are known as a climate hub, right? That's what we've been sort of pushing a lot. One of the reasons is because once you give it a name, it's real and people start thinking of it that way. But really, what that means is that we have companies and people who come to Canada because they see opportunities and they see something here that other places don't offer. Whether it's starting a company or moving here because they want to work on climate and sustainability, we want to be that center that attracts and improves Canadian economy because we have become that hub. The last thing I think is just turning conversations into action. So we have a few plans in the works. We are looking to do more of like a workshop working style group in between the weeks. So we have a full week of events. And then what we're looking to do is analyze all the key kind of pain points that our speakers bring up during those conversations. Once we analyze what's impactful in terms of tackling, we're bringing together government. The City of Toronto has already expressed a lot of interest in this. We're bringing together government and other actors who can make a difference into one room and hoping to turn that conversation into commitment and action and with through follow-up workshops as well.
I love the thesis you're putting out around Toronto Climate Week and just like what this can be. It's one of the reasons I'm like really excited to help out and be involved however I can. So yeah, just really like excited that this is a thing that exists in the world and that you and the team are able to put this on is like kind of mind blowing. Becky, thanks so much for spending some time with us and talking to us about Toronto Climate Week. Where can people learn more or get involved? And maybe like if there's any specific types of events or contributions that you're really looking for this year.
Yeah, so we have our website, TOCW.ca. If you go under the events tab, you'll see all the different kinds of events that are happening. I would encourage you very much. Our event hosts are incredible and doing a lot of work to make really outstanding events. And we also have our Instagram and LinkedIn, Toronto Climate Week, so you can find more information there. I have an amazing social media team, so those accounts are very active. You can find a lot of information
Nice.
there. June 1st to 7th are our dates. The weekend is really designated for more of the fun community events. We have a closing party on the Friday, and then in between, there's a lot of business and more industry focused events. So take a look, see what's interesting for you, see what's impactful for your, career or the goals that you've established yourself. And I hope to see you there.
Fantastic. Becky, thanks so much for spending some time with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, not just for today, but for your ongoing partnership. We really appreciate you.